In a nutshell, the Amish community views homosexuality as a sin, which is why you won't expect to witness people coming out when they are part of an Amish church. However, this does not mean that people of the same sex do not fall in love with one another. It's the total opposite, because with a church like the Amish that boasts a large population, there are going to be people developing feelings for one another. And of course, this includes those who fall in love with a person of the same gender. But how exactly does the community treat these relationships, and how hard is it to be Amish and gay at the same time? Let's find out. Welcome to Crazy Histories, where we bring you the craziest and weirdest facts from human history. Some of the things discussed in this video may be offensive or disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. The Amish Church. The Old Order Amish, also known as the Amish, are a collection of Orthodox Anabaptist Christian church fellowships with Alsatian and Swiss German ancestry. They share a family resemblance with Mennonite churches, a distinct Anabaptist sect. In addition, the church is renowned for humble living, modest attire, Christian pacifism, and the gradual adoption of many contemporary comforts in order to preserve self-sufficiency and avoid interfering with family time or replacing face-to-face interactions whenever feasible. The Amish place a high priority on hard work, humility, and Gelassenheit, or surrender to God's will. It all started in 1693, when a group of Swiss and Alsatian Mennonite Anabaptists, led by Jakob Amann, split off to form the Amish Church. The Amish were then divided into Old Order Amish and Amish Mennonites in the second part of the 19th century, with the latter keeping the use of motor vehicles, while the Old Order Amish kept most of their traditional customs. Even though there are other Amish sects, most people typically refer to the Old Order Amish whenever they talk about things related to the church. As time passed, many Amish and Mennonites moved to Pennsylvania in the early 18th century for a variety of reasons. Amish church membership begins with adult baptism, typically between the ages of 16 and 23, and their worship services are held every other Sunday at a member's home or barn. All church members are strictly required to follow the Ordnung, also known as the church's rules. These rules are reviewed twice a year by the members and vary somewhat between various districts. But wherever district you belong, you are required to abide by this Ordnung, which includes many elements of daily life, such as restrictions on the use of power lines, telephones, and cars, as well as rules regarding attire. In general, the importance of religion and family ties is heavily emphasized. This is why the Amish Church has a very controversial view of anything related to homosexuality. As members, everyone is encouraged to and required to support this as part of the rules they are mandatorily told to follow. Amish and homosexuality. First things first, gay Amish must decide whether to leave the church or bury their sexual orientation and project a straight persona, which is very sad and unfair. But as mentioned above, members of the Amish community are required to follow very strict rules, and this includes their non-tolerant ways and their perception of same-sex relationships. This is why there is no publicly gay Amish subgroup, because personal identity is subsumed to the group, and because Amish culture as a whole is heteronormative. In fact, experts believe that the Amish's attitude toward LGBTQ people won't change, saying that the Amish attempt to maintain their heteronormative standard is part of a larger, long-standing, overarching effort to retain their way of life, regardless of the derision heaped upon them. Counseling could be an option as well for homosexual Amish who want to stay faithful and accepted by the community. You would be surprised, but the Amish are aware that homosexuals require love just like other sinners do. However, since gay activity is so stigmatized, dealing with it in an Amish setting may be particularly challenging. But if all of these efforts do not bear fruit, getting chased out of the community and from your family and home is not impossible. And believe it or not, there have been a lot of cases where members who came out were left with no choice but to move away. The stigma is no different from the previous one, and those who fell in love with a person of the same gender would often find themselves in a similar situation. But for gay Amish, it can be a lot, especially when you are made to choose between your faith and love. Thankfully, there is no beating or torturing like in medieval times. At most, they are made to pack their bags and leave. While this is a sad story, there have been developments in the community, records revealed that they are being more tolerant and are starting to find ways to coexist with their gay brothers and sisters. For instance, there have been stories saying that homosexual Amish will be left alone as long as they don't come out or openly live as gay. But this is not the first time homosexuality and religion have had some sort of conflict, because history will tell you that even before, people who fell in love with a person of the same gender would most often than not have a challenging road ahead of them. Homosexuality and religion. Since then, the Catholic Church has opposed homosexual conduct and does not support it. In fact, the Catholic Church disapproves of same-sex relationships and disputes the legality of same-sex unions. But times are changing, and while there is still an obvious stigma surrounding gay people from the perspective of the faithful, more process is entering the picture. While the Church says it opposes unjust discrimination against homosexuals, it supports what it considers just discrimination in the employment of teachers or athletic coaches, in adoption, in the military, and in housing. While the Catechism of the Catholic Church, promulgated by Pope John Paul II, considers sexual activity between members of the same sex to be a grave sin against chastity and sees homosexual attraction as objectively disordered, it also states that homosexuals must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. This doctrine has evolved as a result of the impact of theologians, especially the Church Fathers and several ecumenical councils. Moreover, other sects are starting to develop more tolerance when it comes to homosexuality. For instance, it is stated at the outset of the United Methodist Church's statement on human sexuality that sexuality is God's good gift to all persons. The declaration is one of many that describe the Church's sexuality doctrines, which basically say that all humans have equal value in God's eyes according to the Church, which affirms this. With all people, it is committed to doing ministry. Families and congregations are urged by the Church not to reject or condemn lesbian and gay members and friends. As a result, the constitutional concept of the Church's inclusivity underlies this, and everyone is invited to worship and take part in the Church's daily activities, and without regard to their sexual orientation or practices, lay people are welcome to join and practice their faith through their local church. The Church also believes that all people, regardless of sexual orientation, are entitled to human rights and civil liberties, and condemns acts of hate and violence against anyone based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Lastly, Pope Francis made a very controversial statement in 2022, which he clarified immediately. In a letter in response to a request for clarification regarding his comments made during a recent interview with the Associated Press, Pope Francis reiterated that homosexuality is not a crime, and that any sexual act performed outside of marriage is a sin. The Pope had stated that being homosexual is not a crime. It is not a crime. He defined it as unjust laws that criminalize homosexuality or homosexual activity, and urged church members, including bishops, to show tenderness as God does with each of his children. In the interview, the Pope reiterated this and said, "We are all children of God, and God loves us as we are and for the strength that each of us fights for our dignity. Being homosexual is not a crime. It is not a crime." He then raised a challenge to that assertion and explained how he would react, adding, "Yes, but it is a sin. Fine, but first let us distinguish between a sin and a crime," and added, "It's also a sin to lack charity with one another." In the case of the Amish, being accepted as gay has a long way to go, but over the years, stories of acceptance have been heard around the community. For instance, an article written by Jim Cates narrates how an Amish gay recognized that there are members who are supportive of his sexuality, and hopefully, time will heal all the judgment and teach each one humility and consideration. The article also talked about how the writer feels whenever another Christian refers to his sexual orientation as a sin, and how these meetings would trigger him to remember the psychological wounding from the past. While there is a long road ahead, who knows? Sooner or later, they will understand that love is love, no matter what. How about you? Do you think the Amish will change their views about homosexuality? Let us know in the comments below. Also, make sure to give this a like and subscribe for more stories from history.